Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Tour Championship DFS Tactics show. Got a lot to cover this evening. We have a forecast to update. We have the price board to look at. We've got a lot of lineups to generate, and a couple of quick announcements here. I am off all next week as I am getting prepared, packing, and then traveling on my vacation / baseball tournament, but I will be back essentially the first week of September, after Labor Day. So make sure you mark your calendars, your reminders, and I am going to be starting Kick as well over that first week of September leading into the Fortinet. So make sure you mark your reminders. With that, I think that's all I have in terms of an update on the schedule. So let's do our regular intro, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You are not going to regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media, my Twitter, Instagram, and my Kick links are in there. Twitter and Instagram is where I post research weekly on the PGA Tour. That was no different. I posted a lot of research around the Tour Championship and the staggered scoring format this past Monday. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do for the PGA Tour, you need to follow at your preferred social media site, Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards every week for the PGA Tour. Those usually come out Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. I am still on the fence about a wager or two. So if you want to see the weekly wagers that I make on the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I do my baseball content. That'll come back as well that first week of September. So if you want to see some quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over there as well. And then Kick, as I mentioned, I'm going to start regularly streaming to Kick as well that first week of September. Different content. I will be doing some sports research, analytic research over there, but a lot more gaming, a lot more other types of content. So if you're interested in that, give me a follow over there as well. And then finally, for social media, Gabe's Twitter is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. Highly suggest you go give him a follow and subscribe to that article. It is free. And starting with that Fortinet on that Wednesday evening, we are going to be picking up, or he's going to be back picking up his chats, which means I will be joining him in his chat to continue the DFS talk after calls on Wednesday evenings. And the only way you're going to be able to join us is if you subscribe to that article over on Substack. So go show Gabe some support. Follow him on Twitter. Subscribe to that article. It is free, and I do owe him a thank you as he provided a little bit of some research nuggets for me that we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. I do want to hold off until he joins chat, but it is all around the putting at Eastlake, and that is credit to Gabe. So want to make sure I give him credit there. And then finally, for this intro, we're live. Chat is open. Have you made any wagers? Who do you think wins the Tour Championship? Who are you focused on in your DFS lineups? Who are you fading? All of that. So jump in chat. Would love the interaction to hear what you are thinking for the final event of the PGA Tour season for the 2022-2023 year. So let's figure out our strategies and our tactics for the 2023 Tour Championship. And we start, as we always do, if my camera will focus, we start with the super forecast of Eastlake for the week. Tomorrow looks perfect. Hot, I'm sure, humid, high of 93, but no wind. Absolutely no wind in the forecast. Friday does look like it could pick up a little bit, but high of 95. And then the weekend, only chance of rain looks like it's going to be perhaps Sunday evening, but I would imagine that the tournament is done by then. No wind, no rain. This is just a full out play your guys that you want to play this week at the Tour Championship. And of course, with only 30 players, there's no wave advantage or wave focus AM or PM or anything like that. So no real adjustments we need to make off of the forecast. So we're going to go straight into Fantasy National. And because this is a Don Ross design, arguably his most known, I would argue Wyndham and Sedgefield is probably his most classical design, but nevertheless, this is a Don Ross design. Our top performers on Don Ross courses since the beginning of 2019 have been Russell Henley, Taylor Moore, Tom Kim, Xander, Sungjae, Victor Hovland, Rory, Max Homa, Terrell Hatton, and Siwoo Kim. And then the other end of the spectrum, players who have not played Don Ross designs well: Jordan Spieth, Corey Connors, Tommy Fleetwood, Matt Fitzpatrick, only 4 rounds, but has not played them well. Grillo, Scotty Scheffler, Nick Taylor, Wyndham Clark, Sam Burns, Adam Schenk, and Sepp Straka. So there you go. There's a look at the top and bottom 10 in terms of Don Ross designs. No wind that we need to factor in, and I didn't feel comfortable using the scoring relative to par filter, even though the majority of the rounds are easy, and with the little amount of wind that's in the forecast, I would expect this to play easy this week. However, if we take a quick look at the past course conditions as a quick reminder, we'll have a round or two every year that does play average. Only one round played average last year, was the final round. Half of the rounds in 2021, one in 2020, and then half. 2 of the 4 played average in 2020. 2019 was a little bit different as the wind really picked up and you had a couple of rounds of difficult. But no, I wasn't comfortable using the scoring relative to par filter easy. I would use it if I had to choose one. But with that, let's just jump straight into the mixed condition model, try to get through that, and then we're going to try to make a lot of lineups since there's only 30 players that we have to focus on this week. So the mixed condition model for the 2023 Tour Championship looks as such here at Calls. 15% off the tee. Mentioned we looked at this on Monday evening, how off the tee was very, very predictive in last year's mixed condition model, and how it was a focus on ball striking last year, and I was going to flip-flop the off the tee and the approach. I ended up doing that. 15% off the tee, 10% in approach, 10% on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. And again, I'm going to save the research for when Gabe jumps in chat, but make sure you stick around to see the results of that. But the exact green surface here at Eastlake is Mini Verde, Bermuda. There's one other course on the PGA Tour consistently that has Mini Verde, or Mini Verde, however you want to say it, Bermuda on its greens. And that is at the Houston Open. Used to be Shell, now it's the Cadence Bank Houston Open, but it's played all the way back in the fall. And it's at Memorial Park. So all the research that I did regarding putting is comparing the Houston Open with the Tour Championship. So make sure you stick around and I'll show you some of the results from that. But credit goes to Gabe in giving me the information that Houston was an exact match in terms of surface type, but 10% on Bermuda fast and lightning speed greens. 5% in birdies or better gained, 5% bogeys avoided, and And I used the filter Don Ross. And I mentioned again Monday that I wasn't really comfortable with a lot on the scoring page. Bogeys avoided was pretty darn consistent in terms of importance. There are a few eagles around East Lake. Of course, guys are going to have to go low to try to catch Scotty Scheffler and Victor and Rory and all of them. So I ended up using the Don Ross filter to see who plays Don Ross designs well, or at least who can perhaps avoid some bogeys, who can gain birdies on Don Ross designs. But that's why I only kept it at 5% for each of those metrics, because we're using a very small sample of Don Ross designs. I did think about opportunities gained. I decided to go a different route in terms of that, using that percentage. You could look at opportunities, I suppose, but when we get to that metric, I will explain why I omitted the opportunities gained. 5% distance. We talked all week how fairways really just don't matter here at East Lake. You can't be hitting it in the water, but players generally aren't really all that afraid of being in the rough. They're just hitting driver. That's the way Rory has won when he's been playing catch-up mode. He just was aggressive the entire time. So I wanted to focus on the distance players in off the tee. And you can argue perhaps looking at 10% driving distance and 10% off the tee to really emphasize that. But it's not the fact that fairways don't matter at all. Players like Colin Morikawa, Abraham Answer, they have played well here and they're not long. It's just I want to give the preference to the longer players. So 5% in driving distance, 15% in greens. We looked through the prior leaderboards on Monday evening. We saw how important it was for players who have had elite success here year over year in the staggered scoring format. Greens just matter. These greens are slightly smaller than the average tour green, and with this being a Don Ross design, there's a lot of protection to them, whether that's runoffs or false fronts, undulation, what have you. Greens are going to be a pretty darn big factor. So 15% in greens, 10% in total procs, and this is kind of where the opportunities went, because total procs looked like it was a pretty important factor Monday, and I decided to go ahead and emphasize it just to even that a little bit more, kind of factoring in the opportunity gain. But closer the players are going to be to the hole, especially on these smaller greens. If you're giving yourself at 5 to 10 foot looks instead of 15 to 20, obvious statements are obvious, but you're probably going to score a lot better. So I wanted to see who is adept at hitting the ball closer to the hole. 5% in par threes. I was shocked all week that they didn't seem to matter, but they don't. So only 5% in par threes. Only 5% in par fives. I would not fault you if you wanted to put 10% in here, especially since they are the two best scoring opportunities on the course, but there are only 2 par fives, so I didn't want to put a whole lot of weight there. Instead, 10% in par fours, 5% in the specific length that matters the most at East Lake, 450 to 5. So there's a look at the mixed condition model that I have built for this week. Some possible weaknesses. Look, I don't have any around the green. I don't see it playing a big factor, even though these greens can be somewhat hard to hit. I'm really trying to emphasize the players who are just going to hit the greens, and hopefully they have a good putting week, and that's why I did a lot of research on the putting. If the Don Ross filter is not the correct filter to use for the birdies are better, for the bogeys avoided, that's going to be perhaps a little weak there. I could potentially see myself being a little weak to players who play par fives really, really well. If anything, this should be 10%, not 5%. Kind of ran out of percent there. So the par fives could need a little bit of extra emphasis, and perhaps a little bit of extra emphasis in total par fours, as we saw Monday night that they were extremely important. But there's a look at the mixed condition model and perhaps some of the downfalls if it doesn't perform well. Let's move on over to Microsoft Excel. The reveal of my rankings for the 2023 Tour Championship goes as such. Jon Rahm is my number one player for the Tour Championship this week at Eastlake. Patrick Cantlay, number 2. Rory, Scotty Scheffler, and Victor Hovland round out my top 5. Lucas Glover, Xander, Ricky Fowler, Colin Morikawa, and Tommy Fleetwood round out my top 10. You'll see that there is an extra column in here this evening. This is their starting staggered scoring format, or starting strokes, if you will. So Scheffler leading is at -10. Hovland is at -8. And so when we start making lineups, we'll be able to see where those players are starting. And it gives you a pretty decent idea in terms of if you're comparing players perhaps in the same area of the price board or style of lineups, you can get a feel for where or how much ground your players have to make up, essentially. And a quick reminder that my rankings always consist of three facets. So the starting score is not factored into my rankings. I would have loved to have done that. I didn't really think of a good way to incorporate that mathematically because there's a formula over here. Just for you data nerds, real data nerds, there's a formula that calculates a value, if you will. I didn't know of a good way to incorporate this. But my rankings always factor in the FNGC rank, which is a straight numerical ranking based on the mixed condition model we just talked about. I do have a little bit of course value, which is an attempt at giving a player a value on how well they have played the course previously. Do note that this is all from the staggered scoring format. The lower the number, the better. And of course, being in DFS, we are trying to find unique options. So percent owned or projected ownership is also a factor of my rankings as a reminder. Good evening, Stephen. Thanks for jumping in chat. That is going to be the goal after what looked like was going to be a fabulous BMW for me that comes crashing down thanks to Victor Hovland's 61. We're going to try to get back on the winning track this week at the Tour Championship. But thanks for jumping in chat. Who is your pick to win? Who are some of the players you're keyed in on? Have you made wagers? All of that good stuff. Good to see you this evening. So there's a look at my top 10. Honestly, probably not a whole lot of surprise except for maybe Lucas Glover for me. I mean, I know he's been playing extremely well, but I don't envision Lucas Glover being a top 10 golfer this week. But he is starting at -5. He's been really bad on Fast and Lightning Bermuda for what it's worth. So I'm a little surprised by Lucas Glover. Other than that, no real surprises in terms of who the top 10 is. You can always argue the ordering, and you can see how little I've put value into course value or previous history here, considering Xander and Rory, even though they are in the top 10, are further down than you might think. Xander and Tommy are in my cores. Well, I agree with one of those. So, with that, let's go ahead and sort on this price board. We only have 30 players to talk about, so we'll try to go pretty in depth here with what we're looking at in the price board. In the 5Ks, or excuse me, in the 5 digits, I call it 10Ks, but when you get into these small fields, you start getting into the 12 and 13,000. So in the 5 digits, we have 8 players: Scotty, Rory, Victor Hovland, John Rahm, Max Homa, Patrick Cantlay, Xander, and Matt Fitzpatrick. We see 2 players that are pretty low ranked compared to the others, especially Matt Fitzpatrick. He's starting at -4, and he finished last year exactly middle of the pack, tied for 15th. He's very, very unique this year, seemingly, at least with the players or with the members of Fantasy National. I am not going to be using any Matthew Fitzpatrick, so he'll be one of the players that I lose to, and there are a few. I'm just going to be essentially all or nothing, especially in a very, very small field. It's going to be very hard to differentiate yourself, so when you do find some differentiation, you just kind of have to hammer it and hope it works out. That's why small fields just aren't my favorite type of event, but we can't control that. So Fitzpatrick is somebody, even though I was really, really high on him last week and he played very, very well, I don't want Fitzpatrick this week. You see the off the tee has not been very good. His irons actually haven't been very good at all. Now what is concerning, at least for me, is he's been very, very good on fast and lightning Bermuda greens, but his win at Harbortown is factoring into this. And I mentioned when we went through the mixed condition model how the matching surface is Houston. It's not Harbortown, it's Houston. So I'm not terribly worried, I suppose, about Fitzpatrick in the putting. Elsewhere in the 5K or the 5 digits, I'm probably going to be using the majority of these players. Xander looks like he is the most projected owned player. Second, behind Rory, which makes a lot of sense. But I like Xander a lot. I mean, he's averaged essentially a 3rd place finish the past 4 years at Eastlake. He loves Eastlake. He always plays very well here. Off the tee is fine. Top 6 in irons. The proximity hasn't been nearly as good, so that could be a little bit worrying. I'm not terribly concerned about it. He's going to be very, very chalky, but it's a very good play. I'm really liking Xander this week. Number 1 in bogeys avoided on Dawn Ross Designs. Number 6 on par 4s. 3rd, it's off your screen, but 3rd in the length of par 4s, 450 to 500. Not a lot wrong there. As much as I was on Scotty Scheffler last week because we were getting a discount, it's not that I'm off of him, but that's just a lot to pay for Scheffler, and we've seen him not necessarily fall apart at Eastlake, but he got caught last year. He did not win when he came in leading the tournament. So I have enough reason to think that he can get caught again, and that's a premium to pay on somebody who might not finish first, especially in a 30-man field. Rory's also going to be very, very chalky for good reason. You can debate whether it's Xander or Rory who has played the best here over the past 4 years. Number 1 off the tee, past 24 rounds. Number 2 in greens. Number 4 in irons. Really, he's only going to be trailing Scheffler in those metrics. Just like Scheffler, the putter is questionable on fast and lightning Bermuda. He's also not avoided the bogeys the best on Dawn Ross Designs, but then again, with him playing catch-up mode, trying to catch the leader, I'm more worried about the birdies, and he's number 2. Birdies are better gained on Dawn Ross courses the past 4 years, so there's a lot to like with Rory. Number 1 in distance, number 1 in par 3s, number 2 at the specific length. So Rory and Xander are very, very good plays. They're chalk I'm not going to be able to get away from. I'm going to be using a whole lot more of Xander than Rory just because of the pricing. But my number 1 player is John Rahm. I don't see any reason why John Rahm won't perform well this week. You can always argue about the putter, but look, he's actually in the top half in terms of putting in this field on fast and lightning Bermuda. So if you take away the scariest part of his game, which is his putter, 5th in procs, number 2 in driving distance. The irons haven't been John Rahm-like. I'm not terribly concerned. He's shown he's played well here before. 5th in greens. I'm not worried too much about the off the tee. There's not a lot of trouble unless you are really, really wayward. There's not enough trouble off the tee here. I think John Rahm's going to be a very, very good play, especially since he is the most unique, except for Fitzpatrick, he is the most unique play in the 10Ks according to Fantasy National. So I like John Rahm, and I also like Patrick Cantlay a whole lot. His one bad year here at Eastlake in the standard scoring format was the first year that the staggered scoring, I keep saying standard, the staggered scoring format was implemented. Since then, he has won and he's top 5. I like Patrick Cantlay quite a bit. He is 3rd off the tee, and we've talked how much off the tee is going to matter this week. Top 10 in irons. As much as he is more of a bent grass putter, he's still top 10 on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. Not necessarily the best at going low, he's 20th in terms of birdies or better, but 5th in par 5s, and I've talked how they probably need to have a little bit more weight. I really like Patrick Cantlay this week. Homa should be okay. It's a little bit high in ownership for my liking. I would much rather go Patrick Cantlay, especially considering he is more unique, starting at the same amount of strokes. Look, I know Max Homa played very, very well here last year. I'm willing to give me the more proven commodity in Patrick Cantlay year over year at Eastlake than Homa in his one very good year. Victor's fine. A lot of ownership. He should be, probably pretty darn chalky. He played extremely well last week and killed any shot I had at making good money. I don't know. It's fine, I suppose. It's a pretty high ownership. Evening Pete, thanks for jumping in chat. How was the BMW? Did you make it to any of the weekend rounds? All of that. Are you ready for the Tour Championship? It's good to see you this evening. So there's a look at the 10Ks. Look, Xander's going to be a good play. I'm going to use a lot of Xander. It's going to be chalky. I want to use Rory, but that price is pretty prohibitive. If Rory's price is prohibitive, Scheffler's is extremely prohibitive. I'm going to use a lot of Rahm, and I'm going to use a lot of Cantlay. And I'm hoping that the putters, at least analytically, line up for them this week. You got to find some uniqueness, and I'll be finding a lot of uniqueness off of Rory and Hovland with going with Rahm and Cantlay. Moving into the 9s, Lucas Glover, Brian Harman, Wyndham Clark, and Ricky Fowler. Again, I talked about Lucas Glover, him being 6th in my rankings. I'm not all that high on Lucas Glover. No weekend rounds, too much of a cluster as a spectator with small field. Been to this tourney twice, and it's the worst. Well, I mean, you can say you've been, so kudos to that for you on that. It was a cluster. Victor Hovland winning was a cluster for me. I had a lineup that had moved all the way up to 4th by early Sunday, making a good deal of money in a big GPP, and it ends up cratering thanks to Hovland. Did Nick sit next to Paulina and Lindsey Vonn one year at Eastlake a long time ago? Kind of jealous. I don't know what to say on that. Just kudos. Kudos on it. Let's see. 9Ks. Like your approach with possibly fading top 2. Yeah, it's possible. Like, it's going to be really hard for me to fade Rory, considering how much he just loves Eastlake. I can fade Scheffler a little bit more, Rory's going to be a very difficult fade for me, and I can't say that I'm going to fade him. I want to make sure I have some usage of Rory, but at 13,000 is a lot. That does not leave you a lot to maneuver, and just a bit of foreshadowing. There's not a lot in this area that I'm excited about. But let's go into the nines. I talked about Lucas Glover. I just don't see him being sixth in this field. I just don't. I know he's starting at -5. He's fifth. He's been putting the daylights out. I get it. Number 2 in irons. Off the tee's been very good. Look, at some point the putter's going to come back to and be bulky. I mean, he's riding a hot putter. It's going to get cooled off eventually. I'm willing to take that chance, especially since he doesn't necessarily play Don Ross Designs the best, or at least he doesn't avoid the bogeys the best. And he doesn't have a lot of distance, and that's what you need here at Eastlake. He doesn't have a lot of it. So I'm willing to have Lucas Glover be, kind of the second player that I lose to, and I don't have any Lucas Glover, or I won't. These two players I am completely out on. Elsewhere in the 9Ks, it's hard for me to believe that Ricky Fowler will be 15%. But last week, I couldn't believe that Ricky was 13%, and Gabe, thankfully provided what he was seeing elsewhere, and he was 10%. So perhaps Ricky is that unique. Fourth in irons, still ball striking it well. The off the tee's maybe not necessarily as great, but still ball striking it well. The putter's not a concern. He is number 1 in par 5s. If they need to have some increased importance or weight in these rankings, I don't see any reason why Ricky wouldn't play at least decently well. And same goes for Wyndham Clark. Now, he is a debutante, a pure debutante to Eastlake, not even just the standard or the staggered scoring format. So that might give you a little bit of cause for concern. I am not worried about the off the tee. The irons, I am a little bit worried. He hasn't been great with those. But Wyndham Clark has the distance. He takes care of par 5s. Wyndham Clark's third in those. For the uniqueness that I'm getting off of Lucas Glover and perhaps somebody else we'll talk about here in a second, and a whole lot of uniqueness off of Xander, I don't mind coming down into the 9s for these two every once in a while. I would much prefer to use Xander, but if I'm already going to be using some chalk and I don't want to make it horrendously chalky, I don't mind using some Wyndham Clark or Ricky Fowler. Again, Brian Harman, just like Homa, just like Victor, it's fine. I don't have strong feelings towards Brian Harman. The off the tee game is bad. The driving distance, at least compared to the others in this field, is bad. But it's Brian Harman. He generally finds a way. It's fine, I suppose. And he is starting at -4, so it's pretty solid. All right. Moving into the 8s, we have Tommy Fleetwood, Sung Jae, Russell Henley, and Keegan Bradley. So let's talk about Tommy, since that's who you mentioned, Steven. And this is one place where we'll be different this week. Tommy Fleetwood has not played Don Ross Designs well at all. And it's a very, very small sample size. So I don't want to scare you off and make you think that he has never played a Don Ross design well or won't. It's a very small sample size, but in the small sample size that we have, he has neither gone low or avoided bogeys on Don Ross Designs. He is 5th in par 3s, and I would have to think they have to carry some amount of importance, but they just haven't over the years. The off the tee game is great. He's also very, very good on fast and lightning Bermuda, but the irons haven't been great. The proximity, 28th. So Tommy is the third player that I'm just out on. If Tommy Fleetwood plays well, I will lose. I'm just not there with Tommy Fleetwood. I want to like Sung Jae, but a lot of people like Sung Jae. Is at 25%. The greens haven't been good. The irons haven't been good. He's just generally played Eastlake well. I want to like Sung Jae. I do not like the ownership. But he does go low, and he's having to chase. So you do like that. The fact that he's only -2, but he's second on birdies or better on Don Ross designs. So that's a good combination. Russell Henley as well, I want to like, but that ownership is hideous. 31% on Russell Henley. Look, he's the number 1 strokes gained total player on Don Ross designs. I get it. But he is last in distance in this field in the last 36 rounds. The putter is okay. It's bottom half, but it's actually slightly positive. He's just 18th out of 30, but it's still slightly positive. I have a little bit of concern, and I can fade the 31%. It's mainly the 31% that I'm fading on Russell Henley, not the player. And I don't want any part of Keegan. Keegan I always look for on bent surfaces. With this being Bermuda, no thank you. And it seems like Fantasy National is off of Keegan as well, or at least a lot of the members at Fantasy National are off of Keegan as well. So don't want any part of Keegan. And that means I'm really not in the 8Ks at all, which probably tells you the kind of lineups I'm building. But again, I'll just lose to Tommy. I'll lose to Russell Henley most likely. I might have him once or a couple times. I do really want to like Sung Jae. I am interested if and when Gabe jumps in chat what he sees some of these ownerships at. I have to feel like Sung Jae would get squeezed out a little bit because I feel like Tommy Fleetwood's going to be much more popular than 24% as well. But yeah, I am nowhere in the 8s, really. Maybe Sung Jae if that ownership is a little bit less. Moving into the 7s, Connors, Tom Kim, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Jason Day, and Siwoo Kim. And I've been living here. I've got quite a bit in here that I like, but it's not Corey Connors. He has not played Don Ross designs well. If I was talking or bringing down Tommy Fleetwood, Corey Connors is even worse. 29th and 30th. Don't want any part of Corey Connors this week. And in 3 tries here at Eastlake, he has never finished inside the top 20. Don't want any part of Corey Connors. He might finish inside the top 20 just because he's starting at -2 now, but I don't like it at all. Terrible on Bermuda in general. He's not a great putter in general, but terrible on Bermuda. I just don't want any part of Connors. Tom Kim should be fine, I think. I think it'll be fine. Again, he did win the Wyndham in 2022. It's a Don Ross design. This doesn't feel like a great fit for Tom Kim, just like Olympia Fields didn't feel like a great fit for Tom Kim. Like I said, he's starting at -2. I think he'll be fine, but I'm much more elsewhere in the 7Ks. Meaning, I like Colin Morikawa. Yes, I've talked about how distance is paramount here. But Colin Morikawa has played well here at Eastlake. The off the tee is good. He hits plenty of greens. Obviously, he's very good in approach, and it's actually down by Morikawa standards. He does. It is scary with the putter. Not going to lie to you there. Being 30th out of 30 in putting is not comforting. Good with procs. He's played Don Ross designs well. Him being the most chalky in the 7Ks, I don't know if I believe it. If he is indeed the chalkiest in the 7Ks, I might come off of Morikawa a little bit. I like Tony Finau, even though he doesn't rate out well at all. I like Tony Finau. He's starting at -2. He's played East Lake all 4 years, or at least 3 of the 4 years. We all know his off the tee game is much better than 21st in this field. He just hasn't been good off the tee lately. I think this is a good place to get correct, if you will, as the kids might say. The par fours are going to have to be a whole lot better. No doubt about that. But he can go low, and he's having to chase. So I do like Tony Finau quite a bit, especially at 14% per Fantasy National. Jason Day, he's rated out well 2 straight weeks. At the FedEx, it worked. At the BMW, it was a disaster. I used a little bit of Jason Day, even though I wasn't terribly high on him. The analytics are finally crashing on Day, so I'm not there. He is one of the most unique plays, if that's something that you're interested in. I'm not there. Instead, I like Siwoo. I really do like Siwoo Kim. You see 4th off the tee in this field. Not great with the greens, but the irons are fine. I'm not terribly worried about the putter on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. I think it's better than what is being shown here. He's also pretty darn good around Don Ross designs. He'll have to go lower because he's in chase mode, but he can at least avoid the bogeys. Not a lot of distance concerning, sure, but he's also 4th in par 5s. So I like Siwoo Kim quite a bit with some price saving. 16% I think is fine. He might actually even be a little bit less than that. If Tony Finau really is 14%, I will be overweight on Tony Finau. It just feels like a good fit for Tony Finau. Moving into the 6s, and probably the best play that I have for you all is in here. But in the 6Ks, we have Tyrrell Hatton, Jordan Spieth, Taylor Moore, and Sam Burns. As much as I said I was living in the 7s, Morikawa, Finau, Siwoo, I love the 6s. Tyrrell Hatton, I don't understand why he's at 6,900. I mean, maybe it's because he's starting at even par, but the guy is just a flat-out grinder. He's not going to give up. He can be 20 shots back. He's never going to give it up. Fine off the tee. Number 6 on Fast and Lightning Bermuda greens. Top 10 in proximity. As I said, he's a grinder. 5th in bogeys avoided, and it's not like he's one of the worst at going low either. So getting this severe, what I feel is a severe price discount on Tyrrell Hatton, plus a decently low ownership. I would have thought he would have been in the mid to upper 20s. Seeing him at 23%. Granted, he is the most common play down here. Maybe arguably with Morikawa. I'm still fine with it if it is 23%. So I really like Tyrrell Hatton. I love Taylor Moore. And I know the metrics aren't looking good on it. 30th and 30th to start, and then 29th. I know that's hideous to look at. It's all about this putter. Number 1 on Fast and Lightning Bermuda greens. Number 1 and number 2 at birdies or better and bogeys avoided on Don Ross designs. He just loves Don Ross designs. 5th in driving distance as well, which those are the players that I've been focused on for the off the tee is the distance. He's 5th. So as much, avert your eyes type of statistics he has. I kind of like Taylor Moore this week. Sam Burns is fine as well. But, you got to find some uniqueness and you got to hope it pays out. I'm going to go with Taylor Moore this week. I used him last week at the BMW and he finished 49th out of 49. So, yeah. But in a small field, you just got to find your uniqueness. I like him much more than Jason Day. I'll tell you that much. And they're, comparable in terms of ownership. I don't want any part of Keegan on Bermuda. They're comparable ownership, so I'll be using Taylor Moore. He's my price-saving, unique play. Sam Burns, like I mentioned, he should be fine, which means I'm actually nowhere near Spieth. Surprisingly, but I'm nowhere near Spieth. He actually hasn't played East Lake all that well in the standard or in the staggered scoring format. The irons haven't been there. For as much as he's a putter, he actually hasn't been all that good on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. He's actually made up most of his ground on POA. So, don't want Spieth. And if you're going into the fives, I don't hate Sepp Straka for reasons we'll get into. I do not believe that he is the 22nd best putter on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. I think he's quite a bit better. And he played very, very well last year in a similar position. I think he might have been -1 or -2, but he played very, very well moving into 7th. So I like Sepp Straka. I don't mind Adam Schenk either. I know Schenk is rated higher than Straka. I would much rather have Straka, especially considering we've seen him play East Lake before. But I don't think Schenk is necessarily a bad idea either. So there's a look at the price board, how I see it playing out. We'll move to tiers contests, and then we'll start making some lineups for the 2023 Tour Championship. So in tiers contests, in Tier 1, we have Scotty Scheffler, Rory, and Victor Hovland. For as much as I was, fading Scheffler and kind of, it's hard to do, kind of fading Rory because of the pricing, you don't have that negative value or negative thought process in tiers. So give me Rory. I mean, it's flat out, he loves East Lake. He's in fine form. He's third of the three in the standings, but the 2 times he has won, he's been in chase mode. So give me Rory in Tier 1. I don't think it's particularly close, but if you want to go somewhere other than Rory, it's probably Scheffler. So I'll go Rory, then Scheffler, then Hovland. But it's a pretty clear Rory for me in Tier 1. Tier 2, John Rahm, Max Homa, Patrick Cantlay, and Xander. Every part of me wants to take Xander. However, in a tiers contest, if you're going to start your tiers lineups going Rory Xander, you're going to match, I would have to think, at least 40% of your fellow contestants. Because of that, I might actually go Cantlay. If you're not concerned about ownership, Xander's the play. By far. Loves East Lake. And it's really hard for me not to take Xander still, knowing I've taken Rory. But I think Cantlay's going to be pretty darn good. Man. I like Rahm quite a bit too. Man, this is tough. I think Max Homa is a pretty clear 4th of these 4 in Tier 2. So I'll go... It's so hard to pass Xander. Give me Xander. Just give me Rory and Xander, 2 players that I know love East Lake, will play well. Yeah. It's very, very close between these 2. It's 1A and 1B. If you're worried about the ownership, I think Patrick Cantley's a good choice. Give me Xander. Gosh dang it. Now I'm going to have to find some real uniqueness. But we'll start with Rory and Xander. Tier 3. Fitzpatrick, Glover, Brian Harman, Wyndham Clark, and Ricky Fowler. Well, I don't like Fitz. I don't like Glover. Harman's just kind of mediocre. Give me Wyndham Clark. He might be a tad bit more chalky in a tiers contest, but give me Wyndham Clark. I think Wyndham Clark's going to catch Lucas Glover by far. Ricky would be fine, but I'll take Wyndham Clark in Tier 3. Feel pretty good about that one. Tier 4, Tommy Fleetwood, Sung Jae, Russell Henley, Keegan Bradley, and Tom Kim. For as much as I love Tier 2, I hate Tier 4. Don't want any part of Keegan. This does not feel like a good Tom Kim fit. Tommy Fleetwood's probably going to be pretty darn chalky. These three will probably be pretty damn chalky. Oh, God, I don't know. Give me Sung Jae, I guess, in Tier 4. I'm hoping he's the most unique of these three because I really don't like Keegan and Tom Kim. Yeah, give me Sung Jae in Tier 4. I don't feel great about it. Tier 5, Corey Connors, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Jason Day, Siwoo Kim, and Terrell Hatton. I like me some Hatton. I am a little concerned that he's a little too popular considering the Rory Xander start. So I might take Finau. Yeah, give me Tony Finau. Hopefully he's unique off of Terrell Hatton and Colin Morikawa enough. Give me Tony Finau. Siwoo Kim could be interesting as well. But in Tier 5, I would go Finau first, Hatton second, Siwoo third. And then Tier 6, Spieth, Moore, Burns, Grillo, Straka, Shank, and Nick Taylor. I'll just plant my flag. I'll just go Taylor Moore. Pretty simple there. Sam Burns might be interesting as well. Seth Straka should be. Seth Straka should play well. I would have to think Seth Straka is going to play well. But give me Taylor Moore. That's where I'm planting my flag this week at Eastlake. So there's a look at the tiers contest. Recap: Rory, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Sung Jae, Tony Finau, and Taylor Moore. All right, let's move on over to classic lineups. Let's see how our fellow contestants are building their lineups and how we can maneuver around that. So, in the chalky lineups, really, Terrell Hatton's about the only one that's getting a lot of attention down at the bottom end of the price board, 6 and 5s. You get 23%, maybe Sam Burns, maybe Spieth, but I'm going to try to make this as chalky as possible. It's going to be really hard to fit in a whole lot in here, but Rory is the number one projected owned player at 13,000 and almost 33% per members at the Fantasy National, which means you've got 7,500 per player here. That means you're going to have to squeeze in a whole lot around here. This is just emphasizing the difficulty of using a Scheffler or a Rory. In fact, we might have to use Sam Burns, who is at 19.2 just to make this work. So now we have 8,000 per. You're still going to have to come into the 7s, which is Colin Morikawa. If I could spell. So then 8,200 per player is Russell and Tom Kim, maybe. Russell Henley. Yeah, and Tom Kim. 25%. That's actually not terrible for a 30-man field. It's not great. But this is just highlighting the difficulty of trying to build a lineup with Scheffler or Rory. Victor Hovland a little bit too, unless you're really coming down into, the dregs, dumpster diving, as Pete would say. Burns, Grillo, maybe Straka. It's just hard to do, and with the chalky plays here, you're pretty far back, except for Rory. You're pretty far back. So what's more likely happening is that you've got a lineup that starts maybe, we'll try Victor and Xander. It's going to be kind of difficult to do it, but I'm going to try to use those two. And then looks like Tommy could be in this. 6,000 per is really difficult. This is Terrell Hatton again. And then in the 5Ks, Grillo is at 18%. Gosh dang, you can't even do that. So this might have to be Homa and Xander. Yeah, that looks a little better. Then, hey Gabe, good evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. I am anxious to hear what you are seeing on some of these ownerships. You just missed the tiers contests. But let me finish this lineup. And now that you're here, I did do a little bit of research on putting around the Houston Open and the Tour Championship and some interesting findings. Let me finish this lineup while I'm at it, and then I'll show you that putting research. And the credit goes to you, Gabe, for giving me the information on the Houston Open being the exact match of surface type. Instead of going to Rory, it looks like our fellow contestants are probably going something like Homa Xander, and then in the 8Ks, it's probably Tommy. You might still have to. Ownership's crazy. Yeah, I mean that's just it's the challenge of a 30-man field, and that's why you have to really, really find your uniqueness where you can and plant your flag and hope it works. One of my sources didn't even bother this week. Yeah, to me, Ricky seems a little low at 15.1. This is per Fantasy National, but again, I was shocked last week when Fantasy National had him at 13 and you had him at 10, and he ended up being at like 8, at least in the big sand trap. So I don't know if Ricky really is that unique. Although after last week, I suppose anything's possible. And to me, Tony Finau seems a little too low here at Fantasy National as well, 14%. But to round off this lineup, that's Siwoo. There's 50,000. Siwoo's really not getting a whole lot of play. There's the trouble of trying to fit in 210s. It's really, really tough. Really, really tough. Even if you have 5Ks this week. Yeah. Before I forget, I want to bring up the putting research that I will thank Gabe for, because he sent me down a rabbit hole for a little bit. So what I've done, I go back to 2019. That's as far back as I go, or 5 years. Here is putting performance at Houston. Here's putting performance at Eastlake. I'm actually seeing decent agreement on Ricky. Oh, okay. Well, then I'd have to think Ricky would be a pretty good play at 15% ownership. So what I've done, there were 40 players that have played the Houston Open and played at Eastlake since 2019. Those players are here. I see Finau at 19 though. Yeah, Finau seemed way too low on Finau. I'd have to agree. Overall, there was a pretty decent correlation. I will caveat this by saying that as a statistician, as an analyst, this is way too small of a sample size to say anything definitive. So I don't want you to take this information as gospel or whatnot, and meaning these players are for sure not going to putt well or for sure going to putt well. But there was a decent amount of correlation. Aaron Wise had always putt Houston Open well. He gained 6.5 at Eastlake. Adam Scott had generally played or putt well at both. Brooks, putt well at both. DJ, JT Poston. You did have some outliers, or some players that didn't agree much at all. Somebody like Jason Kokrak. Granted, he won Houston, so you have to imagine that his winning week probably had a little bit of a spike performance, but he was awful at Eastlake. And this was more than 1 year each time for Jason Kokrak. Justin Rose was complete polar opposites. Gained a ton at Houston, lost a ton at Eastlake. Tom Hoagie, who's generally not a good putter at all, didn't putt well at Houston, putts extremely well last year at Eastlake. So there are differences. But of the players in the field this week at Eastlake, here's their performance at Houston, and we'll see if there are any correlation. So somebody like Max Homa had never putt well at Houston. He actually hadn't putt well for as well as he played last year. He put okay, 0.9, but it's not skyrocket. One of the big reasons why I'm high on Terrell Hatton. He putt well at Houston. He's putt well at the Tour Championship, as you can see here. One of the reasons why I like Tony Finau. He's putt well at Houston. Decent at the Tour Championship. Not great, but decent. Victor has putt well at Houston. Dead even, 0.0 at the Tour Championship. One of the big reasons why I'm off Keegan. He has not putt well on either or at either course. Same surface. Day was okay. So there's a look at a little bit of that research that I did earlier today, and the credit goes to Gabe for giving me the information that Houston was a direct match on surface type. But that is the promised putting research. This week, the player, if they're at Eastlake this week and what they've done at Houston. But here are the 40 players that have played both the Houston Open and at Eastlake, and how they're putting compared both places. And this is on an average basis, average tournament. Which somebody like Sepp Straka, I would have to think, is going to perform much better this year at Eastlake, generally, because he's generally really good on Bermuda. Putt well at Houston. You think about his win at the Honda, fast and lightning Bermuda. I have to think Sepp Straka is going to putt a little bit better. But there's that research that I promised, I teased at the beginning of the show, and now with Gabe having jumped in chat, wanted to make sure he saw that because I didn't have a chance to send it to him before the show. So I'll have that off to the side if there are any other questions around that. But let's get back to making some lineups and seeing how we can maneuver around a lot of this crazy ownership. And we just highlighted it, how it's going to be really, really hard to fit double tens. I'll show you how I've been doing it here in a second. If we're going to try to build a balanced lineup, I'm going to start with Cantley. I don't see any reason why Cantley won't play well this week. He's had one bad performance in a staggered scoring format. It was the inaugural year of the staggered scoring format. He won in 2021 or maybe 2020. He won one of those 2 years. Cantley, he's going to have to play catch up. Third off the tee, fifth in par fours. I like Cantley a lot. You're getting a whole lot of price savings. You're getting quite a bit of ownership discount as well off of others. Cantley's probably cheap enough that you could go Xander, but I'm going to try to build this balanced-ish looking lineup. So as much as I don't like the 9Ks, I could probably come in here for a Wyndham Clark or a Ricky Fowler if you choose. I'll just go Clark because he's one shot better at the moment. Then moving on down into the 8s, I mentioned how I'm off of Tommy Fleetwood. I don't want any part of Keegan. I'll say Sung Jae. I'm not in love with it, but Russell Henley at 30% just sounds horrible. Sounds like a horrible experience. And then I was going to try to bottom this out at Tyrrell Hatton, even though he's the most chalky play down there, because I'm going to save a couple of other players elsewhere. I think we can do it. I think this is Tony Finau and Siwoo, two players who I'm pretty high on. It's a sub 20% lineup that is going to be pretty darn unique considering a 30-man field. The issue is you don't have any of the players that are starting off with all those bonus strokes. So that's going to be the issue in this, what I'm going to call a balanced lineup here. But certainly a lineup that I would feel comfortable submitting, absolutely, and just trying to bank on these guys going low, like Cantley, Wyndham Clark. We know he can go low. Finau has the firepower to do it. Tyrrell Hatton's never going to give up on a tournament, so like that. But if I am trying to build what I think is going to be the optimal lineup, the best lineup, I have been able to do 2 10Ks, and I haven't been really jumping down into the 5Ks, although I will if I need to. But I said it. John Rahm, number 1 player. He's starting at -6. For as much as his putter can get bulky, he's actually top 11 on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. The proximity is still elite. He's still number 2 in distance. He had a bad BMW, yes, but I don't think there's enough trouble off the tee that he won't put himself in position to compete this week. So I really like John Rahm. I want to use Xander, probably a little bit too chalky, so instead I'll go back to Cantley. I'll go Rahm and Cantley and be ultra unique for 2 10Ks that I'm using in this lineup. Now you see the issue that we could be running into here. 6,900 per player left. But I mentioned how I'm not dropping into the 5Ks. I'm planting my flag. Taylor Moore, second most unique play per Fantasy National. Number 1 putter on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. 5th in driving distance. You're going to have to take a chance somewhere. I'll take a chance on Taylor Moore. I also don't mind Sam Burns. A little bit more chalky than what I would like, but he still should be pretty unique. Tyrrell Hatton gives me 8,100, which is Keegan, who I don't want any part of. This is Tom Kim. Not in love with it. Colin Morikawa. Let's use Colin Morikawa. I do like Morikawa this week. I'm hoping he's a bit more... I do like him this week. I hope he's a bit more unique than 23%. But you're giving me, Rahm and Cantley, 2 10Ks that, Cantley's going to have to go low, but he's won before in the staggered scoring format. And then 4 guys that are going to have to just be aggressive, be ultra aggressive. And I'm going on the putting. Taylor Moore, number 1. Burns, I believe, is 5th on Fast and Lightning Bermuda. Tyrrell Hatton, I think, is 5th maybe. And then Morikawa, who's 30th. I'm just using him because he's played East Lake well and he fit in the price. Hatton 6th. Burns 2nd in Fast and Lightning Bermuda. So there's a way you can do a double 10K or double 5-digit without having to drop into the 5Ks. Yeah, it might not look the prettiest down here, but I've got all the confidence in Tyrrell Hatton. Wherever you're going to plant your flag, maybe it's Adam Schenk, maybe it's Jordan Spieth. Whoever you're planting your flag on, that's Taylor Moore for me. I do think Sam Burns should play well. If I'm going to try to build a lineup with Rory, it can be done. I'm definitely going to have to drop all the way into the 5. I'm going all the way down to Sepp Straka. Adam Schenk wouldn't be too bad, I suppose, but I'll go all the way down to Sepp Straka. Again, with the difficulty here, trying to fit 2 10Ks is going to be really, really tough. So instead, if I'm doing that, because Rory is so unique, I might do do the double 9 of Wyndham Clark and Ricky. That's still going to be really, really challenging to do considering Rory's price. I think we used Clark last time. Let's go Ricky. We'll go Ricky. Again, in the 8Ks, I'm nowhere near the 8Ks. Maybe this is a Tommy Fleetwood or a Russell Henley for you. But I'll go Tony Finau. Actually, Tony Finau could go here. Finau, Taylor Moore gives me 86, which is Sungjae. Okay. Again, I'm not in love with Sungjae. It just kind of fits in the price. But another sub 20% lineup where I've got Rory, who is, arguably with Xander, the best player historically at East Lake in the staggered scoring format. And then a bunch of players who are going to have to try to go low and play catch up. But that's what I have for you in terms of the 2023 Tour Championship. I'll stick around for a couple minutes if there are any questions. Would be interested to hear your all's take. Who you think's going to win, who your big pivot is, or who you're planting your flag on, who are you fading. Steven mentioned that he's going with Xander and Tommy. Xander's going to be pretty chalky. Tommy doesn't seem chalky at the moment, which seems surprising to me. But that's another reason why I like John Rahm, at least per the members of Fantasy National. John Rahm seems like he's getting squeezed a little bit. It's going to be really hard to fade Rory. I mean, considering how well he has played at East Lake. But man, that price is prohibitive. And then I don't know if you caught the tiers portion, Gabe, but just very, very quickly, because I've already deleted those columns. I believe my lineup went Rory, Xander, which is going to be very, very chalky, I'm sure. So I mentioned Cantlay if you're worried about the chalk for a tiers contest. But Rory, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Sungjae, because I hate everything in Tier 4. Blah. Tier 5, I believe I went Finau. I think I went Finau because I thought Tyrrell Hatton was going to be a little bit too chalky. And then in Tier 6, I went Taylor Moore because it's just where I'm planting my flag this week. I'll sink or swim with Taylor Moore. But a reminder that I will be, or calls will be off for the next week and a half as I head to Alabama to play in the baseball tournament. But I will be back that first week of September right after Labor Day. Be streaming on Kick. I'll be doing a little bit of research, I'm sure, over there. I'll be picking up the baseball research. But also going to be playing some games and whatnot. Pretty close with you, except Taylor. I'm assuming that means Taylor Moore, which is fine. Like I said, he's going to be very unique, and that's where I decided to go. We'll see by the end of the week and weekend if that's the correct decision or not. And a reminder as well, starting on the Fortinet week, I believe the Fortinet week is the week of the 14th through the 17th, I believe. Gabe's going to pick up his chat again, and the only way you're going to be able to join Gabe and I in his Substack chat is if you are a member or if you have subscribed to his article over on Substack. So make sure you've done that, especially with the, I guess, technically the new year, but players that are having to qualify for the next PGA Tour season. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but you're definitely going to want to be a part of those chats. As the fall, with football being so very popular, we're going to be able to focus on golf and hopefully make a lot of money doing that. Hard for you to fade Spieth in the 6. I get it. I'm a little concerned with the irons, and for as much as you think about Spieth and the putting, he's actually been quite mediocre on fast and lightning Bermuda. And he also, very small sample size, he hasn't actually played Don Ross designs very well. neither adept at going low or avoiding bogeys on Don Ross designs. What he does have, and something that I just kind of ran out of percent on, if these par 5s do, in fact, need a little bit more emphasis in my mixed condition model, that's where he would pick up a little bit. With that, I think that seems to be all the questions. As always, feel free to reach out to me on social media or the comments of the video. I will answer any of those questions before lineups lock tomorrow. But we have reached the end of the 2023 season. It's been very, very fun. Really like him as the class of the tier. Yeah, no, he's absolutely the class of that tier. I believe it's these 7 that were tier 6. I might argue Sepp Straka for the class of the tier, but I mean, yeah, you don't have a lot down here. That's for sure. But I want to thank Steven and P and Gabe for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. It's very much appreciated. Whether you use a little of the insights or a lot, make sure you let me know if you have success. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have had success this week at Eastlake when we start back up with the Fortinet in a couple of weeks. So for all of the wagers that you have made this week for the Tour Championship, for all of the DFS contests you enter this week for the Tour Championship, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.